Welcome to Legends of Data and AI. Each episode includes inspiring and actionable data and artificial intelligence insights from global leaders across industries. Your host, Dr. Usama Fayyad, was the first Chief Data Officer at Yahoo and is Chairman of Open Insights and Executive Director of the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Usama Fayyad, Chairman and Open Insights and Executive Director at the Institute for Experiential AI at Northeastern University, to another episode of Legends of Data and AI. Today, we are very lucky to have as our guest Dr. Ashok Srivastava, who is today a Senior VP and the Chief Data Officer at Intuit, but he's got an illustrious career and past both in the worlds of data and AI, starting with IBM all the way through a startup that went public, then NASA, then Verizon. So great to have you here, Ashok, and welcome.
Usama, it's so great to see you, and it's wonderful to be here in this podcast.
All right.
Very excited.
So given, let me start out with, given your experiences that spanned a wide range of sectors, and especially with today in your current role as SVP and CDO at Intuit, and drawing on some of your experiences kind of advising and working with startups and VCs, is there a big difference between the industries in how they do AI and data science, or is it the same sort of challenges just in different labels?
What a great question, Usama. The way I look at it is there is an undercurrent of things that are the same. There are the similar problems, there are similar data issues, similar technology issues. But what really makes this such an exciting field, and what I love about it since starting working in this area, is the similarity and the difference. So I'll divide it into three areas. There's people. So in terms of people and understanding what the problems are that need to be solved, understanding who to hire and who to manage and how to drive the right results, accountability, those things are quite similar. We always want to hire the best talent and really build upon that. From a process standpoint, we want to create the right operating mechanisms so that we get operational buy-in, so that we get the right models deployed and metrics. The technology turns out to be very similar, that we want to build classifiers, we want to build regressors, want to build natural language processing systems. But what I've found to be so amazing is that when you take these things, even though they're common, and you apply them to a new area, it starts to look different, and there are new issues that you need to address. So the answer is that there is some commonality, but there's also differences. And frankly, I think that the differences make this such a beautiful and exciting field, and something that's kept me going, and I know kept you going for a very long time, to see how these things evolve.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot to be said about kind of the intricate details and the idiosyncrasies of different applications that make them very different from each other, even though at the core, I also believe that the core is the same, the kind of problem you have to approach, etc. So maybe to warm us up, can we start with you sharing a story or two on how AI, data science, and analytics can make a big difference to the business?
Absolutely. So I'll just acquaint you with Intuit in case you're not familiar with it or your audience isn't familiar with it. It's a financial services company, a fintech company that's really focused on helping power prosperity around the world with consumers and small businesses. So I'll start with some stories about what we're doing with small businesses. So if you've run a small business, you know that one of the most important things that a small business owner has to do is understanding their cash flow. So that means how much money is going out the door, how much money is coming in. And the difference between those two numbers can be success or failure. It literally is success or failure. And that's a beautiful machine learning problem. Predict next quarter what the cash flow is going to be for a small business. And we have millions and millions of businesses that we have to do this for. So we're building models that can take information from QuickBooks, which is the platform which ingests all of the financial transactions and other documents, and automatically understand and analyze that information and make predictions. Now, if you look at it from a very fundamental standpoint, this is really a time series prediction problem. But as we were talking about earlier, when you start to bring in the nuances of finance and the timing issues and the fact that some bills are recurring and some are not, and some people pay their invoices on time and others don't, and so forth, it becomes a very rich problem. This is one area that we're really working on. And what we've found, to give you an idea, is that as we're deploying these capabilities, we're starting to see that our models are becoming more and more accurate. These are being deployed globally. And now companies during the pandemic are using this capability in order to manage their financial transactions and their predictions. And the accuracies of these models are very, very high, astonishingly high. And as we go forward, we're hoping to see even more of that. So cash flow planning is one area, but in a completely different world, I'll talk to you a little bit about what's happening in fraud prevention. So here, small business owner, maybe as a merchant, wants to accept credit card payments. And we want to be able to make sure that those credit card payments are not fraudulent in any way. Building models to detect that in real time and to make those predictions is another area that we're working on. These models are extraordinarily accurate and really saving small businesses millions of dollars in chargebacks and in other areas. These are just two areas. Our team is working on everything from time series prediction to natural language processing to deep learning models for extracting information out of receipts and financial documents. There are so many things, but these are two areas that I thought were particularly interesting.
Oh no, great examples. And I agree, working with small businesses gives you, first of all, lots of data, but number two is a lot of variety. Just out of curiosity, when you do kind of cash flow forecasting and maybe create a warning signal to a business, hey, you may have a problem ahead or an opportunity, how conditioned are those models to kind of the different particulars to a small business, what space they're in? How much do you know about those small businesses, and how conditioned are those models based on how much you know about them?
Well, they're highly conditioned. What's very interesting, one of the base capabilities that we have in QuickBooks is what we call transaction categorization. So this means as those transactions are coming in, we need to categorize them into one of 10, 20, 30, maybe even more categories. And that information is used for a variety of purposes in our AI systems and also, frankly, by the small business owner. To give you an idea there, Usama, we're building one model per customer. And so that's about as conditioned as it can be. And so we have millions of models in operation right now, and they're looking at the data as they come in real time, making predictions and then delivering those predictions back. And that information can be used as metadata for the cash flow forecasting. So there's obviously a scaffolding of models that some pull information from other places, but this is the way it works. So generally speaking, things are highly personalized. In some cases, we might build global models for different purposes. Really depends on the circumstance.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I know 10 years ago, if you said I'm going to be running millions of models at the same time, it would sound so unbelievable. And that's another kind of a great example of what I consider kind of some of the legends that are happening in this field, where we're really breaking limits that we thought were unbreakable. I love the focus on the small business, but what do you think are the key issues for large enterprises? Because they have kind of bigger data sets and they have to think about data in general as an asset. What do you think a large enterprise needs to worry about to make AI work at a meaningful contribution to the business?
Well, Usama, as you being the first chief data officer on the planet, I think you know the answer, but I'm going to tell you anyway. You have to get your data organized extremely well. And organizing the data means more than building, as we used to call data warehouses and so forth. It really means building a clean data strategy. Intuit is a vast company, and there's a lot of data from various systems. Some came in through acquisitions, some came in organically. We need to organize it and create circumstances where clean data is readily available in batch processing or in streaming fashion, and that it's packaged in a way that data workers, whether they be AI people or analysts, or whether they are product developers, can access that information and deploy it in the way they need. And so that's a big part of my charter at the company, is to create those kinds of mechanisms, create the technology to do that, and then to drive it into AI and other types of applications. So that's probably the most important thing. Another very important area for large enterprises is to actually define the proper data architecture. So how that technical architecture will be done, and how to prove that that technical architecture will actually drive true business results. Because obviously, if you don't do that, then you can have the most pristine, beautiful architecture, but nobody will care, because they'll say, well, you haven't really delivered the customer benefit that you promised. So we always tie our work, whether it's in data or in AI, directly to customer benefits.
Yeah, and I mean, those are great points, Ashok. In fact, a lot of our projects with many, many companies really end up hitting the wall when it comes to applying AI, is that data is not there in the right format and in the right way. And in the right detail. So this data dependency issue, is it a question of business education to the opportunities? Is it a question of talent technically? Why is it that data is so messy in so many companies?
Because so many companies have built point solutions to solve an immediate problem. Data is something that has obvious value to specific problems, but to say data is going to be ubiquitous and it's going to transform the business requires a leap that I think many people still need to make. And so tying to the business value is important, but frankly, if you get caught there, if you're required to prove time and again, yes, I cleaned up the data and here's the business value, case number 2, yes, I cleaned it up, here's the business value. If you don't generalize for people and say, well, we need to clean up this data and there shall be business value that's far more than the effort that we put in, that's where the real education comes in. And that's done through example. And it's also done through a very rigorous process of showing results and holding accountability, building dashboards, and all of the other things that companies and people need to do to demonstrate value. So we spend a lot of time and effort doing that, but I think to great results.
Yeah, no, and changing the culture and getting that awareness is a very tough thing to do. What are your views in terms of AI? How critical is AI? And I know a lot of people speak a lot about AI to the future of analytics in financial services, to the future of financial services and fintechs in general.
I'll say, Usama, that at Intuit, the company has defined its strategy to build an AI-driven expert platform. So what that means is that we're building platform capabilities that are AI-powered, that can deliver expertise, insights, and value to customers through a computer interface, in other words, through the website or through a mobile interface, through a conversational interface, or through human expertise. So in other words, enabling human experts, tax experts, accountants, or others, to actually have the right information so that they can have the best conversation with the end consumer. So AI here is core part of the strategy, and it makes it extremely exciting, obviously, to work in this field, but also you can see the degree of investment that the company is making in AI. And as one of the leaders in the financial services space, I think that we're uniquely positioned to bring AI into this area and to actually start to disseminate it at scales that we haven't seen before.
So A lot of people also talk about doing AI responsibly, or this responsible AI area that's getting a lot of attention. Enterprises are worried about unintended biases and issues of fairness, and no one really understands what the issues are, and no one knows what professionals who are to drive these efforts in responsible AI must know or be trained on. What is an enterprise to do in this environment?
Make sure, this is what we did. We actually started to invest in AI and ethics and define those principles very early on. So this is something that we've done, and we've started to roll that out internally. We'll be rolling that out externally so that the world can see. And they're similar to the data stewardship principles that we have, but they actually take it a step forward and talk about how AI should be governed. We also have teams of people that think about this and actually take action. And those actions could be reviewing models, reviewing data, reviewing the combination of these, in order to ensure that as people, as experts in this area, we see what the model is doing and how it's doing. We've also declared that all so-called high-risk models, in other words, models that really make an impact on an end consumer's finances, be explainable. And in fact, we've rolled that out to medium risk and also, in some cases, low-risk models. And that explainability is important. We want to be able to understand how the model is making a prediction, why it's making that prediction, and what the potential impact can be. In my opinion, this is the provenance of people. It's not really a technology solution. It's not that you should just build a fairness algorithm and deploy it. It is, you should do that. But more importantly, there should be people whose jobs it is to think about that. We have that within my organization, within the legal teams. We work together on this to make sure that we're doing the right thing for the end customer, and we check ourselves. So my advice to large enterprises, medium enterprises, would be to really set up teams to think about this and to challenge them, and to take the standpoint of the consumer and see how that person would react to the types of choices that we're making from a technology perspective.
A great answer. Intuit is kind of at the center of financial services, especially for kind of, definitely consumers and small businesses in general. But we know the space is kind of rife with all sorts of fintech startups that are kind of nibbling at small problems here and there, attacking from multiple directions. Just curious, how do you view the threats of fintech startups to large enterprise players in the space?
Our sole and singular focus is on the end consumer and what will make that person more prosperous at the end of the year, at the end of their at the point in their business that they are. That's where our focus is, empowering prosperity. There are many companies that are working in this space, and many more to come. Many have come and gone. And I think what differentiates different companies is some are very technically focused. They're trying to solve a specific technical problem. Here we've taken the approach that we're going to use the appropriate technology, whether it's AI or not, is frankly less material than actually solving the stress of a small business. And we believe that that is the enduring approach that we need to take in order to serve those people who are really trying to make their financial ends meet. We're in a very difficult circumstance as a society and as a planet these days, with the pandemic raging on. And before the pandemic, 40% of Americans didn't have $400 in their bank account to pay for a flat tire, or to pay for their child's education, or to buy new shoes or clothing. That's just an unbelievable statistic, 40% of Americans prior to the pandemic. So technology is cool, AI is important, but what's really important is that we work together to solve the problems for those people that are struggling, and that's where our focus is.
So how does that play to fintechs? For, against, how does that play to kind of the interaction between these fintechs, up-and-comers, and established companies like Intuit and others?
Yeah, I think that it implies that brand new startups all the way to larger companies should be focused on those problems, and they should try to drive the right answers for the end customers, because we should be working, in my opinion, we should be working to help solve the problems that real people face around the world. This is not solely about one technology winning, or one approach winning, or one company winning. This is really about helping society move forward, which is, I think, one of the most important things that we can do. That's why I worked here. That's why I used to work at NASA. These institutions are here to actually help society move forward. That's the way I view my job and the work that we do here.
Yep, no, that's a great view. So I'll talk about a continuing problem in our fields. I mean, back in the days when both of us were at NASA, and even before that, to this day, finding the right talent in AI, data science, advanced analytics has always been a big challenge. And in the last few years, it's become a exponentially difficult challenge because of the tremendous amount of the demand. What advice do you have regarding talent? How do you get it, and how do you retain it?
By building and speaking clearly about the mission that we're on. Our mission is to help power prosperity around the world. It's a cool phrase, but for me, it's much more than that. It's really about helping people who are struggling to make ends meet do better in their financial lives. This is one of the few places in the world where we're so focused in that area. That hopefully is an inspiring message to people, and when they hear that, and when they see the opportunity for career growth, for using and building new and cool AI and data technologies, when they see that we are competitive with other players in the market, people come here. We've grown this team very, very large, very, very quickly. And the way it was done is really, in my opinion, on focusing people on that problem, on helping the people in society do better. And I think if you have a mission like that, people will come and they'll throw themselves at it, and they'll be excited about it. If the mission is something different, if it's not really something that's going to hold people's attention, then I think there are more problems. And not to say that there aren't problems in attracting and retaining here. I think we're competing with the best of them. But I think that our mission is something that is highly attractive. And it's frankly one of the reasons that I joined, one of the prime reasons that I joined in this role, is because of this mission.
Ashok, you and I have been privileged to have kind of most of our careers worked for organizations and or companies where AI is a big focus, where there's budgets for it, where it's viewed as important. But I always talk about the AI haves and the have-nots, and I would say 99.999% of companies out there are in the AI have-nots camp. They're kind of looking around, hearing about AI, seeing a few of the big players using it, but not know how to think about it. What advice do you have for companies? I mean, whether they're large enterprises or new startups, in terms of how to think about AI?
Start with a small, well-defined, customer-focused problem that you and your counterparts and other business units, functional groups agree is an important problem. Just start small and identify a key outcome that you and your compatriots agree would be an important and valuable outcome, and write it down. Don't just talk about it, write it down and say, is this what you and I agree is the most important thing for this area? Admittedly small, but is this an important thing for us? And if you have that agreement, if you've had the ability to write that down and define some metrics of success, then make the investment. And the investment, nowadays, these major cloud providers have the tools, they have the technologies available, so you don't need to start writing algorithms from scratch by any means. You can stitch these things together well if you have a person or two. I didn't say 20 or 30. I think 2 people with the right focus and with the right charter and the right backing, can actually do a tremendous amount.
Yep.
And with that, and then with the ability to prove results in a timely fashion, so you can't say a year from now, hang on and it'll be great. You have to say a quarter from now, this is what we're going to deliver. But you do that step by step, and you take the time to advertise the results. This provides credibility. This provides a lot of value to the company, hopefully for the end consumer or the end customer, and then you can capitalize on that. And Usama, I know that you did this at NASA. You've done this in many, many other companies. So I know in your case, I'm preaching to the choir, but this is really the way it's done. And it's so powerful. It's just the implementation of the scientific method in a business context. That's all it is.
Now, what great advice, Ashok. I mean, basically, don't try to boil the ocean. Start small, and then start that virtuous cycle going, and good things will happen, and you'll learn how to benefit from the field. I guess in kind of wrapping up, two more quick questions. In your experience, what's missing in the world of AI and data? What would make it more of a mainstream activity that all sorts of companies can benefit from? I know earlier on you made a point about, hey, remove the friction points. Don't make it difficult and big data projects every time you try to do something. But what else is missing? What else do we need here?
So when AI is bolted onto software, so there's software, in a large company, there's software, and it's big, massive, complicated, and then there's AI. And if these two things are really separate, if you're bolting the AI onto the software, you're always going to be the outsider. You're always going to be proving your value, and there's always going to be the question, yeah, but my software is more complicated and I can do it some other way. What you really need to do if you want to drive fundamental change is to change the way the software itself is architected. And when that happens, then it becomes more amenable and stronger connections to the AI itself, transformation starts to happen. So does that mean that you have to now boil the software ocean? No, it doesn't. It means that what you have to do is find the right hooks in the beginning to say, once you identify those hooks as being the most important places to start to deploy AI, not only do you deploy it, but you also drive the software changes architecturally to accommodate the AI for the future. Because presumably you've made a good bet. So if you say, I'm going to work in this particular area and I'm going to prove success, hopefully that's not the end of the story. That should be the beginning of the story. That should drive further architectural changes in the software that then lead to easier adoption of AI, and then identifying or discovering veins of gold in a mountain, you can start to pursue them, and it becomes easier and easier.
Yeah, don't do AI as a silo, integrate it. So with that, I'll come to my last question. This being kind of the beginning of a new calendar year, and end of calendar year, beginning of new year, people like to kind of make predictions as to what is big the next year, what is up and coming, etc. Any last quick remarks you care to leave the audience with along these lines?
I'm excited about the idea of providing advice at scale, in our case, financial advice at scale. What that means is it's far beyond building predictions, insights, recommendations, and personalization. Those things are important, and they definitely should be done. But finance is personal, and the personal aspect of it is lost in a classifier. It's lost in a regressor. It's something that happens between people. When a person talks to another person about their finances, it's not just transactional. There's actually a lot to it. It could be their whole life, their upbringing comes into play in that conversation, whether you know it or not. I want to build systems, and I want our teams to build systems that can actually provide that level of intimate advice and conversation at scale. And is that a prediction for 2022? Probably not in 2022, but that's the direction that I would like to see us head in this industry.
Great direction. Ashok Srivastava, long-time colleague, currently SVP and Chief Data Officer at Intuit. Thank you for taking the time, and thanks for sharing your learnings and wisdom with our audience.
Usama, it's been great. It's always great to see you.
All right. Thanks, and I turn to our audience to tune in to our next episode, which will also be announced shortly after this one. Thank you and goodbye.
Thanks for listening to Legends of Data and AI. We hope you enjoyed our deep dive into the world of data and AI. If you're keen to learn more about making data and AI work in the real world and in any organization, join us next episode and subscribe to the podcast. As always, you can head over to open-insights.com to sign up for our email list, learn more about the work we do, and have access to data resources. See you on the next podcast.